Have you ever dismissed someone, not for their lack of effort or talent, but for the path they chose, for the knowledge they dared to acquire outside your own rigid understanding? Have you ever overlooked the quiet brilliance, the unyielding spirit, simply because it didn't fit into your preconceived notions of success or worth? This is a story about the profound silence of judgment, the deafening roar of a dream realized, and the fertile ground where old wounds can finally bloom into new respect. Katie Dawson was a name whispered with a certain derision in her father's household, a shadow that clung to the edges of what he considered a proper life. At 29, with a decade spent immersing herself in the intricate dance of ecosystems, earning advanced degrees in environmental science, she was, in his eyes, simply that city girl who chose books over dirt, theories over tangible toil. He, a man weathered by the relentless sun and the stubborn earth of their Nebraska farm, saw her academic pursuits as an indulgence, a rejection of the legacy he had painstakingly carved out for generations. So when Katie returned, not just for a visit, but with the quiet, determined intention to stay, the air in their dilapidated farmhouse grew thick with unspoken judgment, heavier than the dust that coated every surface. The farm itself was a mournful testament to a dwindling era, its fields fallow, its barns leaning, its once vibrant soil leached of vitality, much like the spirit of the man who still clung to its failing traditions. Her father, gruff and hardened by years of struggle, barely acknowledged her presence, his eyes, once sharp and knowing, now clouded by a stubborn pride that refused to see the encroaching decay. He saw only the broken machinery, the mounting debts, and a daughter who, with her neat clothes and academic words, represented everything he believed was wrong with the modern world. "Look at this place, Dad," Katie had murmured one evening, her voice soft but laced with an ache that resonated deep within her. She gestured towards the cracked foundation, the skeletal remains of last year's harvest. "It's dying." Her father merely grunted, his gaze fixed on some distant, invisible point beyond the crumbling porch. "It's life, Katie. Fields get tired. We do what we always done." But what they always done was clearly no longer enough, a stark reality that hung heavy in the air, undeniable yet unacknowledged by the man who had poured his very essence into this dying land. Katie, however, saw not just the decay, but the raw, untapped potential beneath the tired soil, waiting for a different kind of wisdom, a different kind of hand to guide it back to life. She saw a future that her father, shackled by the past, simply could not perceive. She was the overlooked virtuoso, returning to a symphony gone silent, ready to conduct a new, more harmonious movement. Katie wasted no time in unveiling her radical vision, her voice steady and clear, despite the tremor of anticipation in her chest. "Dad," she began, pulling out faded blueprints and scribbled notes, laying them out on the kitchen table amidst the clutter of old farm journals. "We can bring this land back. Not just make it produce, but make it thrive, forever." Her finger traced diagrams of complex root systems, diagrams of water retention, diagrams of biodiversity. "It's called regenerative agriculture. We work with the land, not against it. We heal the soil, increase its organic matter, bring back the microbes, the fungi, the insects. We don't just plant, we create an ecosystem." Her father, who had been grudgingly listening, slowly pushed himself back from the table, his chair scraping loudly across the worn linoleum. His weathered face, already etched with decades of sun and struggle, contorted into a mask of disbelief, then outright scorn. "Regenerative? What nonsense are you spewing now, Katie? You think your fancy, urban degrees taught you more than a lifetime of sweat on this very ground? Hippie talk. Microbes and fungi? We spray for those things, girl. We plow them under. That's how you get a harvest." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound that echoed the parched fields outside. "You want to turn my farm into a science experiment? This ain't no laboratory. This is a working farm, or it used to be. And it needs hard work, not some airy-fairy theories about soil health." His dismissal cut deeper than any barbed wire, yet Katie held her ground, her spine rigid with a quiet defiance. It is a working farm, Dad, but it's failing. Your methods, the old ways, they've bled the land dry. Look at the yield, look at the debt. This isn't about theory, it's about survival, about legacy. We can grow more food, with less water, less fertilizer, year after year. We can make this land richer than it's ever been. Her voice, usually soft, took on an uncharacteristic sharpness, born of frustration and unwavering conviction. This isn't about rejecting what you know, it's about understanding what the land needs now. It's about building something that lasts, not just scraping by. But her father merely shook his head, turning away, his broad back a wall of stubborn resistance. You'll ruin it, mark my words, you'll ruin whatever little we have left. He saw a rebellious child, spouting impractical nonsense. He saw his own failure reflected in her desperate attempt to fix what he believed was beyond repair, and his pride would not allow him to concede. The air crackled with the unspoken battle of wills, a clash between generations, between outdated tradition and the urgent call of innovation, all played out on the stage of a dying farm. Undeterred by her father's outright dismissal, Katie decided to demonstrate her vision rather than merely articulate it. With the tenacity of a seedling pushing through concrete, she staked out a small, neglected plot behind the main barn, an area long since abandoned to weeds and compacted earth. Her father watched, sometimes from a distance, sometimes walking right past her as if she were an invisible specter, his silence, a constant, oppressive weight. He wouldn't offer help, wouldn't lend equipment, wouldn't even acknowledge her back-breaking labor. She started by hand, turning the tired soil, not with a plow, but gently, breaking up the compaction, incorporating organic matter she meticulously gathered, fallen leaves, wood chips, spent straw from the old chicken coop. Her hands, once accustomed to laboratory beakers and keyboards, grew calloused and rough, her fingernails perpetually rimmed with dark earth. She planted cover crops, not for harvest, but to nurture the soil, to hold moisture, to invite the unseen world of microbes back to life. Local farmers, curious but mostly skeptical, would sometimes drive by, slowing their trucks to stare at the lone figure toiling away, a strange mixture of pity and amusement on their faces. "What's she planting, Hope?" One neighbor had quipped to her father at the feed store, eliciting a grim nod of agreement. Financial strain was a constant companion. Every penny she had saved from her years of consulting work went into seeds, specific amendments, and the occasional rented tool. There were days when her muscles ached so profoundly she questioned her own sanity, nights when she fell asleep to the rhythmic chirping of crickets, dreaming of vibrant, living soil. She faced setbacks, a sudden hailstorm that battered her delicate young sprouts, a stubborn patch of invasive weeds that seemed to mock her efforts. Each time, she would push through, reminding herself that the land, like life, required patience, resilience, and a willingness to learn from every challenge. Her father, meanwhile, clung to his old routines, planting a small patch of corn using conventional methods, dousing it with synthetic fertilizers, watching it struggle under the unforgiving summer sun. He would occasionally glance at Katie's growing plot, a patch of emerald green amidst the dull brown, a tiny oasis that seemed to hum with an unseen vitality. He refused to admit it, even to himself, but a flicker of curiosity, quickly suppressed, would sometimes cross his grizzled features. Katie, however, didn't need his approval. She needed the land to speak for itself. Her small patch, though humble, was her silent rebellion, her living proof that a different, more sustainable path was not just possible, but imperative. She was laying the foundation, not just for a farm, but for a revolution, one small, painstaking step at a time. The turning point, subtle at first, arrived in the form of Mr. Silas, a name synonymous with agricultural success and innovation across the state. Not innovation in the way Katie understood it, but rather scale and efficiency, the kind of progress her father admired. Mr. Silas A man in his late 50s with a formidable reputation and an even more formidable corporate empire built on traditional farming was in the area for a series of meetings regarding struggling farms. His own empire, though vast, was beginning to feel the tremors of a changing climate and rising input costs, making him increasingly restless. He was a man accustomed to solutions, to numbers, to predictable yields, but the numbers weren't adding up anymore, and the predictability was gone. He heard rumors of the Dawson farm, a legacy farm teetering on the brink of foreclosure, and decided to pay a visit, less out of curiosity and more out of a sense of obligation to the regional agricultural health. He drove his sleek, black SUV down the long, gravel driveway, his mind preoccupied with spreadsheets and market trends. As he stepped out, the dust settled around his polished shoes, and he surveyed the dilapidated barns, the cracked fields, a familiar sense of agricultural decline washing over him. It was a sight he had seen too often recently. Just as he was about to turn back, convinced there was nothing of interest here, his eyes caught a vibrant splash of green nestled unexpectedly behind the main barn, an almost impossibly healthy patch of crops that seemed to defy the surrounding desolation. It was small, no more than an acre, but it hummed with an almost audible vitality, a stark contrast to the parched, conventional fields nearby. He saw a figure bent over the soil, meticulously tending to the rows, a young woman with a sun-bleached hat and dirt-stained hands. He paused, a flicker of professional interest cutting through his usual detached demeanor. This was not typical. This was not what he expected to see on a farm on the verge of collapse. Katie's father, emerging from the farmhouse, saw Mr. Silas and quickly shuffled towards him, his face a mixture of deference and embarrassment. "Mr. Silas, sir. Didn't expect you. Just, just a neighbor trying some newfangled ideas. Nothing to see here. The rest of the farm, that's where the real work is. Though it ain't much to look at these days." He waved a dismissive hand towards Katie's plot, trying to redirect the influential man's attention to the dying traditional acreage. But Mr. Silas's gaze remained fixed on the verdant patch, his keen eyes already assessing the texture of the leaves, the density of the growth, the sheer health radiating from that small, vibrant rectangle of life. The catalyst had arrived, and he was already observing the anomaly that was Katie's quiet revolution. Mr. Silas, accustomed to the subtle art of observation, politely nodded to Katie's father, but continued to walk purposefully towards the small, thriving plot. "Newfangled ideas, you say?" he mused, his voice smooth and deep, carrying a deceptive lightness. "Sometimes, Mr. Dawson, new ideas are precisely what an old problem needs." He reached the edge of Katie's regenerative patch, bending down to scoop a handful of the dark, crumbly soil. It felt different under his fingers, richer, softer, alive, a stark contrast to the hard, depleted earth he'd felt across so many struggling farms. He noticed the earthworms, the vibrant array of insects, the sheer diversity of life teeming beneath the surface. He saw the cover crops, the strategic planting patterns, and the obvious lack of the telltale chemical residue that usually coated the leaves of conventionally grown produce. Katie, startled by his sudden appearance, stood up straight, wiping her hands on her worn work pants. She recognized Mr. Silas immediately, his face a familiar presence in agricultural journals and news reports. Her father, meanwhile, hovered awkwardly a few paces behind, visibly agitated by Mr. Silas's intense interest in what he considered a foolish hobby. It's regenerative agriculture, sir," Katie explained, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke about her passion. "We're rebuilding the soil, enhancing its natural fertility, improving water retention, reducing erosion. It's a long-term investment, but the returns are incredible." Her father interjected quickly, a desperate attempt to reclaim control of the narrative. "She's just experimenting, Mr. Silas. Trying to prove a point. It's too slow, too small scale for a real farm. It won't feed anyone, not really. Doesn't fit with how we've always done things here. how we have to do things. Mr. Blanks and Silas, ignoring the father's sputtering, turned his gaze to Katie, his eyes sharp and assessing. And what are your yields like on this experimental patch? He asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his tone. Katie met his gaze, unflinching. Already comparable, in some cases better, than the yields from heavily fertilized conventional fields. And with significantly fewer inputs, the taste is superior too. She picked a ripe tomato from a nearby vine, its skin glistening, offering it to him. Mr. Silas took it, his fingers brushing hers, and was surprised by the weight and firmness. He took a bite, his expression shifting from professional assessment to genuine pleasure. The flavor was profound, bursting with a vitality he hadn't tasted in years. His skepticism, a lifelong companion, began to crack, eroded by the undeniable evidence before him. He saw not just a healthy plant, but a tangible solution, a whisper of hope in a landscape of failing agricultural practices. He saw Katie not as a defiant daughter, but as a quiet, determined force of nature, embodying a future he desperately needed to understand. The summer was merciless, a blazing inferno that scorched the Nebraska plains, pushing temperatures into triple digits for weeks on end. Across the state, conventional cornfields, once green and robust, now sagged, their leaves curling inward, brittle and yellow. Irrigation systems, already working overtime, struggled to keep up with the demands of thirsty crops. Farmers despaired, watching their livelihoods shrivel under the relentless sun. Katie's father, once again, planted a small patch of corn using his traditional methods, hoping against hope that this year would be different. But his corn, despite his efforts, mirrored the suffering of every other farm in the region, its stalks thin, its ears barely formed. The air was thick with the scent of dying plants and the unspoken dread of financial ruin. Yet, amidst this widespread desolation, Katie's small regenerative plot behind the barn stood as an astonishing anomaly. Her corn, planted using no-till methods, surrounded by thriving cover crops, its roots plunging deep into soil rich with organic matter, remained vibrantly green, its stalks sturdy, its ears plump and heavy. The ground beneath her plants, unlike the parched, cracked earth of her father's fields, remained moist and cool, holding on to every precious drop of dew and the occasional, fleeting shower. Bees buzzed lazily among the blossoms of the companion plants, a testament to the thriving biodiversity she had painstakingly nurtured. Mr. Silas, having quietly returned several times to observe Katie's progress, chose this harrowing moment to make his move. He organized a statewide agricultural conference, ostensibly to discuss drought mitigation strategies, but he had a secret agenda. He invited Katie to present her findings, to speak about her methods, to show her living proof. Her father scoffed, dismissing it as a fluke, a small anomaly that would never scale. But the invitation came with the powerful backing of Mr. Silas, and for the first time, Katie's work was truly on a public stage. During her presentation, accompanied by drone footage of her thriving plot juxtaposed against the desiccated landscape of neighboring farms, a palpable silence fell over the room. She spoke with a quiet authority, her words backed by irrefutable data, by the very visual evidence that flashed across the screen. When she finished, a ripple of stunned awe spread through the room. Then, Mr. Silas rose, not to praise her, but to announce a partnership. His vast agricultural network, his financial resources, his scientific teams would be put behind Katie Dawson's methods. He declared her farm, once considered a lost cause, would become the state's first large-scale regenerative agriculture hub, a model for the future. He didn't just endorse her, he elevated her. The news spread like wildfire. Katie's father, sitting in the audience, felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. The casual mockery, the dismissive laughter, the condescending glances he had directed at his daughter for years, now echoed back at him, amplified by the thunderous applause for her triumph. His face, usually a mask of stubborn pride, crumpled. He was forced to confront the undeniable public proof that his city girl with her urban degrees had not just been right, but had unveiled the very solution that could save them all. The ground beneath his feet, much like the parched fields outside, seemed to crack, exposing the raw, unyielding truth of his own blind prejudice. With Mr. Silas's formidable backing, the transformation of the Dawson farm began in earnest. The small, vibrant patch behind the barn expanded rapidly, absorbing the tired, conventional fields like a healing balm. Teams of agricultural scientists and engineers, funded by Mr. Silas's initiative, arrived, not to take over, but to learn from Katie, to scale her meticulous methods. New equipment, specifically designed for no-till and cover cropping, hummed across the acres, replacing the old, destructive machinery. The farm was a hive of activity, but it moved with a different rhythm, a slower, more deliberate pulse that honored the earth. Katie, no longer just a lone figure toiling in obscurity, now walked the fields as a leader, her voice clear and authoritative, guiding the teams, making the crucial decisions. Her father, meanwhile, found himself adrift. His old routines were obsolete. His conventional wisdom, once the bedrock of his identity, had been publicly overturned. He was a relic in his own domain, watching his daughter command the very land he had once dominated. He tried to resist, muttering under his breath about the cost of the new techniques, the slowness of the process, the sheer unnaturalness of it all. He attempted to interject during planning meetings, only to be met with polite but firm corrections from Katie, or an even firmer gaze from Mr. Prom. Silas, who, while respectful of his age, made it unequivocally clear who was in charge. One evening, after a particularly trying day where his suggestions were gently but consistently overridden, he confronted Katie in the kitchen. "This is still my land, Katie," he growled, his voice thick with resentment. "You can't just come in here and change everything. Push me aside." Katie turned from the sink, her eyes steady and unwavering. "It was your land, Dad, but it was dying, and you refused to change. Mr. Silas's investment isn't just about the land, it's about a new model. And part of that model is recognizing who rebuilt it, who leads it now." She paused, her voice softening slightly, but her resolve hardening. "You want to stay on this farm? You want to be a part of its future, a part of our family legacy? Then you pay to be here. Not in money, not at first, but in acceptance, in humility. In learning the new ways, my ways, you learn, you contribute, and you acknowledge that this is my vision now. And eventually, yes, when the farm thrives, you'll pay a symbolic rent, just as any other partner would, a small portion of the profits, to acknowledge this farm's new direction and ownership." Her words hung in the air, a final, unyielding declaration. The concept of him paying to stay on his farm, even symbolically, was a bitter pill. But the alternative, to be exiled from the only home he'd ever known, to watch his legacy completely dissolve, was even more unbearable. The cynical gatekeeper, the stubborn resistor, was cornered. His resistance, once a solid wall, now crumbled, brick by agonizing brick, under the weight of his daughter's undeniable triumph and her quiet, firm command. Within 2 years, the Dawson farm was unrecognizable, not just visually, but in its very essence. Where once dry, cracked fields stretched, now vibrant, undulating waves of green and gold carpeted the landscape, teeming with life. Diverse cover crops flourished alongside robust cash crops, their synergistic relationship creating an ecosystem that hummed with health. The soil, once depleted and lifeless, had transformed into a rich, dark loam, teeming with earthworms and beneficial microorganisms, acting like a giant sponge, absorbing and retaining water even during extended dry spells. The farm had not just recovered, it had soared beyond anyone's expectations, becoming a living testament to regenerative agriculture's profound potential. It was no longer merely the Dawson farm, it was the state's premier regenerative agriculture hub, a beacon of sustainable innovation. Farmers from across Nebraska, and indeed from neighboring states, now made pilgrimages to witness the miracle. They walked the fields, marveling at the vibrant health of the plants, the sheer density of life, the resilience in the face of climatic challenges. Agricultural universities sent their students, researchers came to collect data, and environmental agencies lauded its ecological success. Katie, once the overlooked daughter, now commanded the respect of every expert, every farmer, every government official who visited. Her quiet determination had blossomed into undeniable authority. She gave lectures, led tours, and advised on policy, her voice calm but resolute, always grounded in the practical reality of what she had achieved. Her name, once whispered with derision by her father, was now spoken with reverence across the agricultural community. She was no longer just Katie Dawson, the scientist. She was Katie Dawson, the visionary, the pioneer, the woman who had brought life back to dying land and redefined what farming could be. And her father? He was a changed man. The initial bitterness, the resentment, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, been chipped away by the undeniable evidence of Katie's success. He saw the steady stream of visitors, the awe in their eyes, the respect they held for his daughter. He saw the flourishing crops, the healthy animals, the vibrant life returning to every corner of their farm. More importantly, he saw the secure financial future, the absence of crushing debt, the legacy not just saved, but transformed into something greater than he could have ever imagined. His pride, once a barrier, now began to swell with a different kind of emotion, a quiet, profound admiration for his daughter. The stubborn lines on his face softened, replaced by a gaze that held a grudging respect, sometimes even a flicker of awe. He still watched, still observed, but now it was with a genuine desire to learn, to understand, to witness the quiet miracle unfolding before his eyes. He was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the very first time. The final transformation on the Dawson farm was not just in the soil or the yields, but in the once strained relationship between Katie and her father. The initial bitterness that had shrouded him, the resentment he harbored for her radical changes, had dissipated like morning mist under the relentless sun of her success. He no longer grumbled about city degrees or scoffed at hippie nonsense. Instead, he often walked the fields silently beside her, his once skeptical eyes now observing with a profound, almost childlike curiosity. One crisp autumn morning, as they stood together overlooking a vast green expanse of cover crops, a sight that would have once infuriated him, he cleared his throat, a sound heavy with unspoken words. "Katie," he began, his voice rough with disuse for such earnest sentiment, I was wrong. About all of it. About you. About how this land could be." He turned to face her, his gaze direct, filled with a raw humility she had never seen before. "You saved this farm. You saved our legacy. And you taught me more than a lifetime of farming ever did." The words were simple, unadorned, but they carried the weight of years of unspoken pride and prejudice. It was an apology, a heartfelt admission, and a profound declaration of respect all rolled into one. Katie felt a warmth spread through her chest, a healing balm over old wounds. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his weathered arm. "We saved it, Dad," she corrected softly, her eyes glistening. "We did it together. You taught me resilience, and I showed you what that resilience could build." From that day forward, the payment, that symbolic rent she had once demanded, transformed into something else entirely. It was no longer a punitive measure, but a shared responsibility, a contribution to a collective future. Her father, now an eager, if sometimes still gruff, apprentice, diligently studied the new methods, attended workshops, and even offered his hard-earned wisdom from years of experience, albeit now filtered through a lens of regenerative principles. He took pride in the numbers, not just the yield, but the increasing organic matter in the soil, the improved water quality in their well, the burgeoning biodiversity. He became her most ardent, if still quietly understated, supporter. The relationship was healed, built not on the old power dynamic of parent and child, but on a new foundation of mutual respect, shared vision, and a deep, abiding love for the land that had always bound them, but now truly united them. The once cynical gatekeeper had not just been proven wrong, he had been redeemed, his heart transformed by the unwavering light of his daughter's truth. The Dawson Farm stands today not just as a successful agricultural enterprise, but as a vibrant monument to the power of vision, perseverance, and the profound, transformative potential that lies dormant within us all, waiting to be unleashed. It is a place where the earth breathes, where water is cherished, and where a family, once fractured by generational divides and stubborn pride, found its way back to wholeness through shared purpose. Katie Dawson, the young woman once mocked for her urban degrees, emerged not only as a pioneer in regenerative agriculture, but as a living example of how true wisdom often springs from unexpected places, defying rigid expectations and preconceived notions. Her journey reminds us that the greatest innovations often arise from those who are overlooked, those who dare to see a different path when everyone else is trapped by the conventions of the past. It shows us that true strength isn't just in clinging to what you know, but in the courage to unlearn, to embrace new truths, and to nurture the potential in others, even when it challenges your deepest held beliefs. It is a story that whispers of redemption, not just for land, but for the human spirit. So consider this. What hidden gems lie dormant around you, unrecognized and underestimated, simply waiting for someone to see their true worth? What rigid beliefs are you holding on to that might be stifling growth, both in yourself and in those around you? The world is full of Katies, quietly cultivating miracles in the shadows, defying the odds with their unyielding spirit and their deep, often unrecognized, wisdom. Will you be the one to finally see them? Will you be the one to challenge the cynicism, to champion the overlooked, and to help unleash the transformative power that lies within every individual, every idea, every patch of neglected earth? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that true value is rarely found on the surface, that perseverance can mend even the deepest divides, and that sometimes the greatest harvest comes from planting seeds of hope in the most unexpected places. Let this tale inspire you to look deeper, to listen closer, and to believe in the boundless potential that awaits when we choose respect over derision and open-mindedness over stubborn pride. The future, much like a thriving regenerative farm, depends on it.